All right, how's it going today?
Good.
You guys good? You're like wide awake. It's like the middle of the day, so you're good to go. Love it. We are, continuing through our series Unstuck. We got a tagline that says Hidden Realities in Plain Sight, and we're walking through the parables of Jesus as we go there. We have a bunch of people online, and can we just welcome them warmly to the gathering? Thanks for being online today. Just pumped to have you as part of the overall community we call Cedar Hills Church. And so, settle in. I got a lot to say, and we're going to go places today. So we're in the series about parables Unstuck, and Rodney walked us through the parable last week. Anybody here for that one?
Yeah.
The vineyard workers, and did such a great job of showing us how to approach fairness in the kingdom of God. This idea of embracing gratefulness, whether or not we think the world is fair. And so this week we are going to be in Matthew 13. So if you have a device or a paper copy of the scriptures that you want to follow along, and you can get to Matthew 13 right now. Throughout this series, we're just allowing these parables to help us rethink the way we see and view and perceive the work of God in his kingdom and in this world. Jesus had such a great way of helping people get unstuck in their thinking by just shifting the way that paradigms were built. He inverted our thought process and allowed us to see and hear just how things really were in God's here and now kingdom. And he used these parables to do this. He wasn't answering questions, like just handing out answers to questions that people were asking. He was stepping in and he was really addressing and exposing like these big cultural unspoken assumptions that were going on in the world at the time. And he was using these stories and these parables to sift through people that were ready to hear and those that weren't. The group that was ready to understand and dig in to that understanding and the group that wasn't ready. They were a commentary on everything else that Jesus was doing in his work. They were this complete package that Jesus was using to bring about God's kingdom into reality. And it was coupled with exorcisms and healings and the way that he was creating these symbolic families that would come together and eat together, and they would celebrate God's kingdom. They'd do life together in these symbolic families. You know, all these different people coming together, kind of like Cedar Hills, right? The unlikely group of people from different experiences and different paradigms and different understandings and different amounts of time walking with Jesus. Like, we all come together. We all do life together. That's what was happening in Jesus' day. You ever been in a situation where you were trying to explain a concept or explain the theme or tell a story, and you just couldn't figure out the right words or examples to use to convey this message? And maybe it's that you weren't communicating well, or maybe it was the listener. They just weren't kind of hearing it well, and so it's just not working, right? Like, you ever been in a situation like that? I was in a gathering of like a party that I was at one point, and a bunch of us were standing around, we're talking, hanging out, and we somehow got on the topic of sharing stories about where we had been outside of the States, outside of the country. And so we're all sharing these stories and asking about culture and food and all that kind of stuff. And somebody caught wind that I had been in Venezuela for a few months doing some missions work. And so people are asking, about that, and like, what were we doing? Like, what does it look like to live in Venezuela and all that kind of stuff. And there was this girl in the circle of people that was talking, and like, she was a super valley girl, right? And so she's asking me all these off-the-wall questions about, like, doesn't even happen in Venezuela. And like, she had no idea what was going on. She goes, when you were in Venezuela, did you tell people about Cheez-Its? And I was like, Cheez-Its? Like the cracker? And I was like, I don't think I'm hearing what you're saying. And so I said, can you ask the question again? Or yeah, it's awkward, right? Like, you're totally missing it. And so, yeah, like when you were down there, like letting people know about Jesus. And so people are chuckling. They're starting to chuckle, right? And they're picking up on what's going on here. And I have no idea what she's saying. And I'm like, come on, people, give me a clue here. Like, I'm dying. And she finally, like, starts elevating her voice. Like, Valley girls don't really elevate their voice, right? They're just monotone. No offense to anyone. However, this is the story. I'm just retelling it. And she's like, yeah, like, telling people about him. Like, sharing who he is. And I was like, oh, she's saying Jesus. And I'm like, that makes total sense now, right? What she's saying. You ever been there? Like, I mean, when we dive into this parable today, we're gonna figure out a few things like that. A couple things stick out. Like, Jesus found it super difficult to tell this story in like these earthly terms that he had available. And he's also like hyper focused on building this like-minded group of kingdom builders with a group of unlikely participants. Those two pieces are so critical today as we look at this parable. So let's go to Matthew 13, and here's what it says. It says, here's another illustration Jesus used. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed planted in a field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but it becomes the largest of garden plants. It grows into a tree, and birds come and make nests in its branches. See, if you're just reading this parable on the surface, you're going to pick up a handful of things. Like the mustard seed parable is about small to great. Things are small and then they're great. We live in this quick fix world, and so the understanding of good things taking time to grow. This idea of micro-sized seeds that mature into trees, like in a fairly short amount of time, like growing to 3 feet or 10 feet or 20 feet. There's a sense in this parable that we all just need to be patient, right? These would all make like fantastic themes for this parable, but that's not at all what Jesus is getting at. See, it's super difficult to read only this parable without taking into context all the parables that are in chapter 13 of Matthew. See, several of them talk about seeds and farming and plants. It's at the foundation of most of the stories that he's sharing. Because seeds, see, they want to grow. They want to expand. Seeds, they want to thrive. Like the basic foundation and design of a seed, its whole purpose is multiplication. And if you were on site with Jesus as he was telling this parable, like you came into this conversation as a Jewish listener, like expecting the kingdom of God to look a certain way. Like, and you were expecting it to be this huge display, like a rich and powerful king with a lot of military backing is going to come in. If you were familiar with the Old Testament scriptures, which a lot of his listeners were during that time, like you may be expecting lightning and thunder, like this big royal procession announcing this king and this kingdom. There'd be government overthrow and social and religious oppression would be gone. This whole reform, this whole flip. There'd be a role reversal for this master and slave society that was in place. See, you would have all kinds of context for every single word that Jesus was saying. See, mustard seeds, they were seen as invasive. It was said that the seed would start to germinate like as soon as it hit the ground. And once it started to grow, like it was almost impossible to get rid of it. See, if you read this in the original language, the way it was written, we'd have a bunch of questions. Like the first one is like, was Jesus talking about a mustard plant? or a mustard tree. See, the plant and the tree are totally different sizes. In fact, the seeds are different sizes. And beyond that, the color of the seed is totally different. Like one is light colored, one is like really dark colored. This mustard plant wasn't allowed by Jewish law to grow with certain other plants. This plant was both planted in fields as a grain crop as well as gardens as a vegetable. One was more like a garden plant, and then one was more like a tree with these big branches that could support the weight of nesting birds. And then we have this word birds, and the original translation is birds of the air. And these types of birds were seen as unclean. They were huge birds, like eagles or vultures or owls or osprey. Could this type of bird easily make a nest in the branches of a plant? And then beyond that, should anything unclean be allowed in God's kingdom? And then we're left with this question, like did Jesus take the plant and the tree and then like mix them into one example? If you read this in Mark's account and in Luke's account, Jesus has something that he says in the first sentence of this account. It says, "How can I describe the kingdom of God? Like, what story should I use to illustrate?" The way that's written, there's a tension that's presented that Jesus is kind of walking through. Because he knew there wasn't going to be a good comparison in nature for the power of the kingdom. Like, he was saying, what is happening in this spiritual realm as my kingdom grows? It's really hard to explain with these physical world examples that I have to use. In some other parables, we see Jesus being okay with the engagement of humans in his kingdom not being perfect. Like the line, birds of the air nesting in the branches. It moves us to see that Jesus was saying the people outside the Jewish line, those people that were seen as unclean people, like they would also be invited into the work of the kingdom. Jesus was explaining that this kingdom and the work and the participation and the involvement, it's open for anyone that would choose to put their trust in Jesus. He was flipping these paradigms. Because see, the mustard seed did such a great job of describing the origins of God's kingdom, but Jesus said it is like a mustard seed. See, the plant, it doesn't go far enough to actually describe God's growing, expanding kingdom. Because God's kingdom is its own unique kind of mustard plant. It begins small, seemingly insignificant. Kind of what Hannah was saying. And then it grows, and it becomes something unexpected, like something that could easily be missed. Like it adapts to the will of God. John Dominic Cresson says it like this: it's not just that the mustard plant starts as a proverbially small seed and grows into a shrub of 3 or 4 or even higher feet tall. It is that it tends to take over where it is not wanted, that it tends to get out of control, and that it tends to attract birds within cultivated areas where they are not particularly desired. And that, Jesus said, was what the kingdom was like. Not like the mighty cedar of Lebanon, and not quite like a common weed, but like a pungent shrub with dangerous takeover qualities. Something you would want only in small and carefully controlled doses, if you could control it. Man, that's good. See, the kingdom of God is dangerous for those not ready for it. And it's dangerous for people that are ready for it, right? Like it's viral. It happens even though you don't always see it. Like God's kingdom wants to grow and expand, and it wants to break down the walls of resistance and opposition and oppression. It wants to create life and beauty and creativity in the most unlikely parts of our world. Because it's built with people who know that our world needs love, that it needs hope, that it needs a future that's like better than today. And it needs willing people to partner with it, to meet the needs of those around them and point them to the true source of life. It's Jesus. See, the kingdom is not content with staying safe, staying in its designated area. It's resilient, it's strong, it's insatiable. It can exist in the most desolate of places. And it invites you and me to bring who we are to fuel its growth. See, a lot of us are looking for God to make himself known in these giant and loud and famous ways. And I think for a time that's okay, but I mean, we're seeing here that that's rarely how God works, right? You know, what if we stopped waiting for God to do these big, massive things with lightning and thunder and bam, here we come, like types of stuff, and we just start looking for him in the small areas? What if we started with simple acts of love? What if we allowed the small things we do to reflect Jesus? What if all the things we did took on the characteristics of a mustard seed? What pockets of change do you think we would see develop in our world today? See, there's power in doing these small acts of Jesus-y things. Jesus was doing these in his life, through his whole life. He's doing these small acts of the kingdom, small acts of love, small acts of seeing people, meeting them where they were, in these small pockets of society. See, when we serve people in small ways, most of the time, that's big impact in someone's life. Things that come easy to you, things that easily happen with what you have, most of the time are huge impact items with people around you because they need that, they want that, they desire that. You carry with you something very special. You know, being sensitive to noticing that God is at work around you. And you see, a lot of times we're stuck in this reality that leads us to believe that God's kingdom needs fireworks and publicity to work. And I think what Jesus wants us to embrace is the reality that God's kingdom starts and grows and expands with small things. What might God be showing you about your thinking, about your paradigm, about your perspective, and even about like our value system? Maybe he's showing you your priorities need to shift. Maybe a little, maybe a lot. What choice could you make today that could grow into something in 5 years? Like choosing sobriety today, so that in 5 years, you're not just sober, but you're present, you're dependable, you're healed, like you're deeply trusted by people around you. Like choosing today to apologize sincerely when you mess up. And then 5 years from now, you've built relationships like rooted in honesty and in grace, not in perfection. Choosing to text a friend today instead of isolating, so that 5 years from now, you've cultivated a circle of people around you who knows the real you and still want to be around you, right? Writing down one thing today that you're grateful for, so that in 5 years you've trained your heart to notice beauty in chaos and in broken. You're able to be sensitive to the small things that God is creating in desolate areas, in painful areas, in areas that don't usually breed beauty. You're seeing these things emerge. Maybe the choice today is putting Jesus first in your life, and you're doing that for the first time today. So that in 5 years or 1 year or 6 months, you're like living into God's reality of purpose for your life. Maybe he's showing you the small things that make you who you are, seemingly insignificant, are exactly the piece that he needs in his kingdom right now. Areas of your story, areas of your talent or your skill or your gifting. Maybe it's just in the way that you see people and affirm God's work in their lives. I want to invite us to reflect on this right now. And so the band is going to play through a song, and let's stand together. You may choose to stay in your seat and sing. You might choose to just stand there and reflect. As the band starts playing, you might choose to sit back down and just spend some time talking to Jesus about one of the things. You might be a person that's a kneeler, so I would invite you to come up front, like use this space to kneel. You might be a person that's expressive with your hands or your eyes. I want you to feel free to step into that. I would encourage you to come up front in this area, and just as community, we can reflect and sing together. Nothing magic about coming up here, and zero pressure to come up here, but there's something about us coming together in community and doing something together, experiencing something together, reflecting and walking through what we're learning together. So as the band starts playing, feel free to move forward if you'd like. Feel free to stay in your seat and reflect on something that we've been talking about today. After that, I'll come up and I'll close this out.